Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Cricket Podcast. This is an Insights episode, and what we're hoping to do with the Insights series is give you a short podcast which will give you important information that'll help you elevate your fantasy cricket game. Today's episode is going to be about the fantasy cricket point scoring system, particularly in T20 cricket, and for that I've got Azza on hand with me.
Hi, Nick. Hope you're well, and let's get started. So, we're trying to pick 11 players in a fantasy cricket scenario, and let's just keep it very simple, right? So you're playing fantasy cricket per match. It's not per week like some other sports. So in any given match, there's going to be 22 players in the announced lineups from both teams. And the job of a fantasy cricketer is to pick 11 players who they think will be the best or the highest performing in terms of the point system that we're just going to get into. And that's what you're really trying to do there. Now, just quickly, let's get started on the point system. The most basic thing that every platform will offer you is that you get points for every player that you pick being actually starting in the match.
Okay, that's important because those are really easy points to guarantee yourself. If you're getting a couple of points lost each match because you've not picked a full 11, that can be the difference between coming first and coming second. But when it comes to picking an 11, Azza, is there a composition that you have to go by? Is there a limit to the number of players you can pick from a team?
Yeah. So let's just get into that as well. So cricket is divided into different competencies, and that's really how the fantasy point system and the fantasy team makeup is also structured. So on any app, you start right away by picking your wicket keepers. You can pick anywhere between 1 and 4 wicket keepers on most apps. Then you get started on your batsmen. There's a separate page for that, a separate page for all-rounders, and a separate page for bowlers. Now, for bowlers and batsmen, you have to pick 3 of each, whereas for all-rounders, you have to pick at least 1 and maximum of 4. So that's really the makeup of your 11. Now, when we come to the distribution in terms of the 2 teams that are playing, there might be cases where you want to pick 10 out of 11 players from just one team because it looks so promising. Unfortunately, you can't do that. You're sort of restricted to 7 and 4 on all the apps that we've seen. So that's 7 maximum that you can pick from any given team. And so by the other team, you have to pick 4. And that also brings in some interesting dynamics into play.
Yeah, I think fundamentally what that means is that we have to be wary of the fact that whilst you have 7 players potentially from a team that you really like the look of, that's very promising, you need to be clever about your 4 other picks from the opposition and how that might impact the 7 that you've picked from your other team where you may have picked 7 from. With that in mind, I think now is the perfect time to jump into the actual point scoring system, and let's start with the batting, Azza.
Yes, so simple thing in cricket, you score runs and you pick up wickets, and the job of batsmen is to score runs, and so ostensibly you get points for every run that a batter scores. Now it differs from app to app. So what I mean by that is that you might get 1 point for every run on some apps, and you might get 0.5 points for every run on some other apps. But then that half is sort of scaled for all the other points on those apps as well. Now, that's just the basic points for runs. Then there are the bonuses that start kicking in. And the bonuses in particular are you get a bonus for a boundary, which is a 4, an additional bonus of maybe 2 points for a 6. So that's to do with your ball by ball run scoring. And then there's the aggregators for how many runs you score in an innings or a batter scores in an innings. And that's 30 runs, half century, century in T20 cricket. And those, again, are incrementally increasing in that order. And then finally, on the flip side, if a batter, a wicketkeeper, or an all-rounder get out for a duck, you're looking at negative points. So again, if it's +1 points for a run, you're looking at -2 points for a duck.
So obviously the dream scenario is you have a batsman who scores a lot of runs very quickly, hitting boundaries, and does so consistently, so you know that you can bank on that player. But I suppose the other considerations are when building a team, knowing that you've got a minimum of 3 batsmen to pick, is maybe you go with one batsman who might be more of an accumulator, even in the T20 format. Maybe the other batsman is someone who blows hot, blows cold, but will get you those quick fire runs quickly. So it's about looking at each game individually and trying to find that balance, knowing that wicket keepers, for example, will also get you batting points. All-rounders can get you batting points. It's about establishing what kind of approach you want to take. You can go for an absolute maximum points where you go a high risk situation, or you maybe think, well, I'm going to be a little bit safer, pick players who might not score very quickly, but will score perhaps a bit more consistently. So I think that's an important consideration for batting.
Definitely. And you touched upon something where you said that wicket keepers, all-rounder, and batsmen pick up points for batting. Of course, bowlers, if they come into the innings and bat, they pick up points as well. But there is one place where they're not picking up points, which we didn't touch upon, and that's to do with the strike rate points. Now, strike rate, very simply put, is the number of runs divided by the number of balls. So it's just a ratio of number of runs per 100 balls is what we're looking at. And that's only applicable to all the competencies except for bowlers. Now, what we're looking at is you get positive points for strike rates above 130, and there'll be maybe 3 bands usually. If you're scoring at between 130 and 150, which is a respectable strike rate, you're looking at about +2 points. If you're scoring between 150 and 170, you're looking at 4. And then if you're scoring above 170, which is absolutely brilliant, you're looking at +6 points. On the flip side, if a batsman is scoring particularly slowly, say a strike rate of below 60, you're also looking at negative points for low batting strike rates.
So good strike rates get you points. Lower strike rate does not get you points. That's not going to apply if you're a bowler. The other consideration, if you've got a bowler who comes into bat, is that if they get a duck, they're not going to be penalized, unlike the other competencies. And no disrespect to our bowling friends, but they are probably more likely to get a duck. But they're not in your squad to get you batting points. They're really in your squad to get bowling points. And I want you to tell us how they're going to do that, Azza.
Yeah, so as we said, wickets and runs, those are the 2 metrics in cricket that we're really trying to get to win matches. So bowlers rely on wickets to win their team a match. And so, of course, you get plenty of points for every wicket that a bowler takes. Now, in some apps where you're looking at +1 point for batting for every run, you're looking at +25 points for a wicket, which is very interesting, Nick, because that tells you that a batter would have to score 25 runs to earn as many points as a bowler would get with 1 wicket, if that makes sense. And that's without any of the bonuses obviously kicking in. So it really gives a lot of respect to the bowlers. We come from a culture in cricket where, especially in T20 cricket, where batsmen are sort of the stars of the game now. But this 25 points tells you a lot, and especially when you look at the bonuses involved. So in T20s, if your bowler is getting you an LBW or bowled, you're going to get an additional bonus of 8 points, which is so that you're looking at about 33 points then on a LBW or bowled wicket. And then there's bonuses on the aggregate wickets in a match. Again, that's 3 wicket, 4 wicket, and 5 wicket hauls, incrementally increasing points, 4, 8, and 16. Now, in their quota of 4 overs, if a bowler is to pick up a 5 wicket haul, he's getting you a lot of points.
It's important for me just to interject here for a second, but the points example you've given us is from one app. Different apps have different points considerations, different haul bonuses as well that might be a bit different. But the bottom line is, especially when it comes to looking at wicket hauls and maidens, you're getting bonus points for that as well. So it's not just the wickets, it's wickets at a decent strike rate if you're picking up those wickets, but also wickets with a decent economy rate if you're picking up those maidens.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just for the maidens as well, so you're picking up bonus points. Again, there are some apps that value a maiden or a wicket much more than some other apps. So we would encourage the listener to, depending on the app you're on, pick your team accordingly. So what is the valuation that a bowler is bringing to that fantasy cricket league? And finally, Nik, I'd like to just touch upon economy rate for bowlers. So T20 cricket, of course, you're expecting bowlers to go at above run a ball. Usually you're expecting them to go at about 8 runs and over, in modern T20 league cricket especially. And so the bonuses really start kicking in terms of the positives for run rates or economy rates rather below 7 runs and over. So it's there might be bands of between 6 to 7 runs and over. You get positive 2 points, 5 to 5.99 runs, you get plus 4 points, and then anything below 5 runs and over, you get plus 6 points. And then on the flip side again, if you're going at above 10 runs and over, you're going to be incrementally getting negative points as well. So be mindful of that. And just one last thing I'd like to say about this is that a minimum of 2 overs have to be bowled according to most apps. What that means is that it doesn't have to be a bowler. If it's an all-rounder, but he's bowled 2 or 3 overs, then these bonuses also start kicking in.
So with bowlers as with batsmen, again, you're looking at consistency. Obviously, I think that's just the MO of playing fantasy cricket. But there's also some room, once again, to be risky. You've got a minimum of 3 picks. You can go for a bowler who you think might go for runs, but is going to be an attacking bowler, so he might get you wickets. You could also choose to go for a bowler who might not necessarily get you a lot of wickets, but is a very good defensive bowler, might pick up some maidens, might not have as high an economy rate. But I think the final segment, we need to really focus on fielding. And I bring up fielding because maybe you're torn between 2 players in a position. And what's going to make the difference between picking one over the other? Well, you get points for fielding. So there is merit in looking at who the better fielding option is.
Yeah, definitely. So again, the job of a fielder really is to contribute to the wicket-taking and run-saving ability of their team. In terms of fantasy points, we're looking at the wicket-taking ability, and the fielders are most involved in catches, stumpings, and runouts. Those are the 3 big categories that you're looking at. So each catch will bring a fielder plus 8 points if it is 1 run for every batting point scored. However, if a fielder picks up 3 catches in a match, there's another bonus that kicks in. It might be 4 points, 2 points, depending on the app. And then runouts as well. So outfielders contributing to a direct hit or an indirect hit would have sort of points allotted to them sort of appropriately. And finally, you're looking at wicket keepers' points for stumping in particular. So there's a lot of points on offer for stumping. You're looking at something in the range of plus 12 points for a wicket keeper.
So having a good wicket keeper obviously helps in the batting department, but it also helps in the fielding department because they're going to be getting points for catches. They could be getting points for runouts. They could also be getting points for stumpings, depending on the situation. you've touched upon this. We've touched upon this a couple of times. These bonus points vary from app to app. Certain apps have different bonuses attributed to different areas. One thing that doesn't differ across apps, and that is consistent, is captaincy. And that is captaincy and vice captaincy, and how those multipliers affect fantasy cricket. Azza?
So when you're making a team and you're on your fantasy cricket app, you go through the wicket keeper, you select your bowlers, your batsmen, your all-rounders, and that's your team. You come to a final page where you can see your team in a sort of list, and then you have to choose a captain and a vice captain. And the role of both of these players is to add additional bonus points, multipliers to your team. And so what you're looking at for a captain is 2x points for whatever they aggregate from their points that they accrue in the match. And similarly for a vice captain, it's about 1.5 times what they accrue in the match. So there's oftentimes, you could have two players, Nik, where they have exactly the same 11, but because of their captaincy and vice captaincy pick, it could be the difference between winning the match or losing it with your friends.
Yeah, and I know I've had that in the past where I've picked a team that's performed well, but the difference between first and second has been my captaincy or my vice captaincy. But on the flip side, I've also had situations where perhaps some of my team have not performed, but a stellar captaincy performance or a stellar vice captain performance have really sort of picked up the pieces. And I think that's the bottom line. The bottom line is that you should be mindful that captaincy and vice captaincy can be a high risk, high reward game. You can go for a player that you think you can bank on, but you could also really play again with that risk factor and say, you know what, this player might not do it, but I'm going to give him the captaincy because if he does kick off, I'm going to score a lot of points. And there's value in doing that because there's no limit to the number of teams really that you can play within reason. So it makes sense to look at different permutations in terms of the squad buildup that we mentioned at the top of the insights. But with that in mind, your various combinations of bowlers, batsmen, all-rounders, wicket keepers, and then in that context, captaincy and vice captaincy. Azza, anything else to add?
No, precisely, Nik. And lastly, the purpose of this podcast is to give a very broad overview into the fantasy point system. And we're going to build on that in future Insights episodes. So stay tuned for that. We're going to refer to this episode in the future when we look at more deeper sort of analytics-based things that can really give you the edge when you're looking at fantasy.
Yep, that sums it up brilliantly. We hope that this gives you a little bit of an insight that'll help you in your next fantasy cricket match with your friends or with whoever you're playing with. And we're thankful of all of you to be listening in. And please support us if you can. There's a link to a Patreon, or just provide us feedback. We're constantly looking to improve and get better. And we'll be publishing some new content as soon as we can. Thanks a lot for listening. Thanks, Azza.
Yeah, thanks, Nik. Thanks for listening. Bye.